for justice from corporate America, but we also need to embrace the global climate strikes. I say this as someone who loves and supports our beautiful labor movement. A labor movement that's won an 8-hour workday. A labor movement that's ended child labor. A labor movement that won weekends and vacation. I believe our labor movement can also be a part of winning a Green New Deal. Climate change while also changing the economic circumstances for workers in our country. Thank you so much for having us.
Okay, and you guys can answer this based on your expertise and if you feel comfortable, but I have a couple questions about Green New Deal organizing. So, what is DSA's approach to the Green New Deal and ecosocialism?
Yeah, that's a great to start a question. So, to start off, I think a principle that shaped a lot of our thinking, YDSA, about how to approach Green New Deal and climate politics in general, is that in the 21st century, talking about building socialism without taking ecology seriously is a dead end. And ecological politics without socialism won't have the tools it needs to be politically effective, or it's going to end up becoming authoritarian and oppressive and will be rejected by the working class. And you're seeing that already just in the past few years since we came to that understanding. We're seeing massive protests and strikes in France, in Chile, in other parts of the world where somewhat climate or energy-related policies were put into effect by neoliberal or right-wing governments. And we're just, it was like the needle in the haystack where after decades of austerity and neoliberalism, that was kind of the last straw for many people, and they just rejected it. So in the United States, where so many people have been suffering under neoliberalism for so long, if we do climate policy the wrong way, in a way that doesn't challenge capital, it's just going to lead to very counterproductive effects. So that was something that really shaped our understanding. And then on the flip side, we knew that it had to make conditions better for most people. It had to improve a lot of the ways that people have been suffering under capitalism for so long. So climate politics has to deal with the crisis of climate, very quickly, but also it can improve life for most people. So we're seeing that now with AOC and Bernie, and these very popular policies that are being presented under the banner of the Green New Deal are actually just very popular. Like, little polling has been done in the United States shows that majorities of people, I think in both parties, support what's being discussed under a Green New Deal. So it took a while. It took time and effort to make that a priority within YDSA, to make Green New Deal something to really center. I think 3 years ago, when we had the 2017 National Convention, climate was very popular. A lot of people wanted it to be that priority. Thank you. Is that better? Yeah, so in 2017, a lot of people in YDSA at the convention wanted climate to be a priority. How about now? Okay, good. Okay, I'll just talk louder into it. Thank you. Yeah, so 3 years ago, a lot of people in YDSA wanted climate to be a national priority, but there wasn't as much structure in place to figure out how to actually organize around it. So within the Eco-Socialist Working Group, which was created at that convention, we just knew we had to put in the work to figure out how to organize around it, how to make sure we had as many people on board as possible, so that within 2 years we would be in a strong position to organize a socialist climate priority. So there were some kinds of pushback we got from, in and around YDSA on the left. A lot of people thought that climate was really important to organize around, but it's something to do with like after the revolution, like after we do socialism, then we'll deal with climate. But we knew that the urgency of the crisis means that we have no time to lose. Like we can't just hope for some kind of total political transformation and then start dealing with it years down the line. It has to start now. We need to figure out what to do within So anyway, once I think it was the fall of 2018 when Sunrise Movement and AOC really broke this open to the public as a major issue, and just like really started to build momentum around what was then by then being called a Green New Deal. And a Green New Deal isn't a new framework. People have been talking about something called the Green New Deal for over a decade. This is the first time that a progressive group or network of groups have really started to frame it as something different than what somebody like Thomas Friedman at the New York Times was calling a Green New Deal back in 2008. So once that momentum started to pick up that fall, we knew that this is our time to not just to help build the momentum for something that we recognize is really important, but to also shape the contents of it, because the resolution that AOC put out was very good and very ambitious. It has some really big goals that we agreed with, like aiming for zero emissions by 2030 or as soon as possible, talking about 100% renewable energy as quickly as possible, separating workers through a federal job guarantee, and other things that were just not being discussed in the political mainstream until then. So there were already very good and radical things in that resolution that we agreed with and wanted to help build support for, but also we knew that there were other things in that resolution that were kind of vague, or left room to possibly be co-opted by capital, which is something that we know in a co-op political system happens all the time when demands that are popular, that have working class support, if there is actually power to implement them in ways that build worker power, that are equitable, they're going to be co-opted. So we knew that we had to do a lot of work to build demands that are going to be more necessarily ambitious, but also just to shore up power to in fact just do what's already in there. So we started a very intentional deliberative process within YDSA to figure out what were going to be our YDSA Green New Deal plan, what were going to be the principles that would guide our organizing around the Green New Deal. And we spent a lot of time just having calls and different working groups to craft language and to shop it around to different chapters within YDSA that were doing climate-related work, different ideological tendencies. We wanted to build as much consensus as possible. And we came up with a list of 7 principles that were meant to guide Green New Deal organizing for possible years to come. We knew that this would be a single bill that passes through Congress. This is too big for that. This is going to be something that is an organizing framework that happens over a course of years or a decade or more. The original New Deal wasn't a single bill in Congress. It was a bunch of different policies, and none of it was won without the power of a massive organized working class movement. There were socialists and communists and militant labor organizers organizing for demands way more radical than what ended up becoming part of the New Deal in the 1930s. And they were prepared to keep organizing for much more than all sorts of other things happened, the war, etc. So, so we knew that we needed to start off with a much broader set of demands for a Green New Deal in the 2020s, and we needed to be ready to organize for the long haul. So I'm not going to read through all the principles now, but these principles are meant to orient our organizing for years. Not just, we're not going to win it all in one shot. This is to be a vision, a sort of like maximal set of demands on the horizon to organize for. And then in the near term, we figure out what it makes sense to actually organize for in terms of near-term demands. Like if there are bills that we engage with in Congress, like what are our criteria for engaging with them? So in general, like the first one that's really important is to actually decarbonize the economy as fast as possible by 2030 for a successful for years, major corporations and like liberal politicians who've been shaping climate discourse have been talking about, like net zero by 2050 or later, which is, from the beginning in international climate negotiations, people from countries in Africa and Asia and South America, the Pacific Ocean, have been saying that that's way too late to be effective. It's going to, condemn whole parts of the planet to be uninhabitable within our lifetimes. So it's just unacceptable to talk about, shifting off responsibility that late. And rich countries like the United States, which are most responsible for global climate emissions historically, have the most responsibility, but also the ability and resources to transition to zero carbon economy way faster than other parts of the world. principle is to democratize major energy systems, because under present systems of ownership, the capitalists who control the fossil fuel industry and agriculture and transportation, they're not going to, change everything in a way that hurts the bottom line, which it will, because right now fossil fuels are essential to every part of our economy. So we need to democratize ownership. That means public ownership over as many systems as possible. And the point of that is just to emphasize that the future is a public good, not a private luxury. The principle is to center the working class and aid us transition to a caring economy. So that includes major policies like the federal child guarantee, because there's so much work that needs to be done to reach to transition from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. And those jobs right now are not profitable for capitalists, so they don't exist. And the ones that do exist, like in low carbon sectors like teaching and nursing and other parts that are very important, are underpaid and under-resourced. So if we have, if we really set in the working class, I mean, creating a lot of jobs and supporting them and making sure that they unionize and, just drive the entire process. Fourth principle is to decommodify survival, which means as much as possible, aspects of your life that are necessary for survival, like food and energy, shelter, healthcare, things that are things that you need to live should not depend on your ability to work for the pay. So, yeah, I mean, that's basically this principle. Fifth one is to reinvent our communities to serve people and the planet over profit. Because right now, so much of the physical space we live in is driven by the real estate industry or other major industries that only care about their bottom line, but that's actually not good for the people who live in spaces. Sixth one is to demilitarize and decolonize to build international solidarity against the existential threat. Right now, the biggest barrier to global climate politics is the United States, because the U.S. is an empire, and the U.S. Right now has been blocking progress in every major agreement and keeping it from being as ambitious as possible. So we need to transition from a war economy into a peace economy, and as Bernie Sanders says all the time, we need to shift from trillions of dollars in weapons and then militarization to actual climate change. And the last one is to redistribute resources to diverse polluters with just and progressive taxes on the rich, corporations, and great industry, and to divert funds from police, prisons, and the fluid military budget that can deal with climate change. So I'll leave it at that.
I'll just briefly talk about, in terms of DSA making these principles real. I want to talk very briefly about the ComEd campaign and other public power campaigns around the country. So public power is a really old school socialist demand that people were working on 100 years ago. You might have heard of the sewer socialists in Milwaukee and other places. And public power is something that, similar to many socialist demands, is actually not that radical. There are publicly owned utilities in lots of places. The city of Los Angeles has a public electric utility. The state of Nebraska, is there anyone here from Nebraska? No? Okay, we're for sure. I've got to organize it there. But the state of Nebraska has entirely public power, and 75% of the folks that live in rural areas are actually cooperative owners of their electric infrastructure. This was the most successful New Deal program. A lot of people don't realize that, though, because old white men that have been in power for decades have consolidated power, and they make it seem like it's just like ComEd or Con Ed in New York or all of these other shitty investor-owned utilities that get hundreds of millions of dollars of profit based on the electric infrastructure that they build and then passing those costs on to your electricity bill every single month. So as an example, ComEd in Chicago made $200 million of profit last year based on the bills that they were, and the money that they were extracting from ratepayers. And so they have a contract, a franchise agreement with the city of Chicago that has only been renegotiated 2 or 3 times in its 100-year history. And so in 2018, I found out that this contract was coming up for renegotiation, and I worked with some people for a few months to put together a campaign within Chicago YDSA to say we should intervene into this contract process and demand that the city municipalize or take public ownership of this private utility. So we would be buying or seizing electricity, and so we could take that infrastructure, we could run it as a public utility like what LA does, but in that process we could also set up more democratic methods of governance as well, because the people in LA, they are able to push harder because it's a public institution, but they don't have democratic control over the institution. And this is something that, unfortunately, rural electric cooperatives and public utilities, some of them are the most dirty pieces of electric infrastructure in the country. So just because something is publicly owned does not mean that it's like on the straight and narrow towards decarbonization and climate justice. But the idea that socialists can put forward is that it makes it easier for us to demand and have democratic control to create systems of governance and decarbonization pathways and that sort of thing. And what would we be able to do with $200 million of profit if it wasn't sitting in the Fat Cat's checkbooks? We would be able to do all sorts of things. So we put together that campaign, and I think the thing that I want to emphasize, and then I'll go right back to Arcadius, we can go through the other questions, is that this campaign, it took a lot of internal organizing. It took many one-on-one conversations with leaders within the organization, talking to people that were doing the campaign to lift the ban on rent control, talking to the people that were trying to stop the Cop Academy, talking to the people that were working to elect socialists, talking to the people that were gearing up for the CTU strike that was happening, and saying this is something that we should be building power around, and as socialists we can have a comprehensive analysis of how these campaigns can be interacting with each other, how we can be supporting each other, and how we can use it to train each other up on organizing skills and be in motion together.
What sets DSA's approach to climate change as eco-socialists apart from past organizing around climate or from taken by other organizations right now?
But more so on paper. But I think to me the real challenge is how we get outside. You can see who supports a Green New Deal in Chicago, there's like 300 people. But then when you get to the suburbs, it's just like, oh no, that's, all this, that's too much, blah, 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 blah. So, I think being able to grow to different regions, especially in regions like ours, where there's real immediacy and a real fight, and the contrasts are there, it's affecting all these people. I think these could be strategic places for interventions. I also, just this global climate strike. I went to the one in September, and I've never, and I've been around the block. I've never seen that many people engage. It was really inspiring. But I think DSA can provide some kind of leadership role within that movement, that talks about things like democratic socialism and municipalization, and the real need for public infrastructure, and to build unions and build the working class power. I think that there's a lot of openness to that analysis, but people are really just, they want a Green New Deal because they're scared and out of their mind for their future. The thing we'd like to do is really, as warehouse workers for justice, is really agitate the labor movement to take this moment more seriously, but also to see the opportunity. I mean, Sean mentioned Occupy and things like that, and I don't think you get the Fight for 15 or the Bernie Sanders without that. And I think that the global climate strikes can, in the same way, create possibilities for groups that weren't necessarily expecting that. And what I'm going to try to do is to try to get some of my labor comrades to not be so obtuse in their approach to that. So wish us luck. And the way we're going to do that, at least more immediately, we're connecting Earth Day to May Day. We're doing a whole series of action in Chicago and DC, 10 whole days. We had a bunch of people here in Chicago. The next meeting's on the 19th, 6 p.m. at CIU Healthcare if you're here. Come out because we're going to tear it up and we're going to connect Earth Day, the global climate strike that's in reference to labor organizing and militancy. We're going to connect it to real labor organizing, and we need the labor movement to be more militant about saving our future. That seems like something that should be in our interest.
I think one of the things that I heard there is in terms of connecting Earth Day to May Day and really having serious politics that's undergirding the reason why we're fighting for climate justice. It's about political horizon that we're putting forward, which I think the labor movement at its best does do. Many of the existing climate and environmental organizations, many of these organizations were around, they were founded by white supremacists who wanted to have land to hunt on 100 years ago, and that DNA is still deeply within those organizations, and I think some of them have gotten a lot better over the years, but unfortunately they also are funded by the table scraps of the ruling class, namely philanthropy, and so they get foundation funding in order to do their work. And so then when they talk about democratic organizing, when they talk about having a set of really grounded politics, a lot of it rings really hollow. And then you see folks see labor as just one other constituency, one other special interest group that then gets left behind, instead of seeing labor, both existing unions and the working class more broadly, as a really historical agent that needs to be moved and gotten in motion around climate organizing. I think the one other thing too that really sets apart YDSA and climate justice organizations, but there is a tradition of climate justice organizing that existed before YDSA exploded, and it exists in deep relation to the labor movement. And that's environmental justice organizations and climate justice organizations. So here in Chicago, there's the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization, which is a hyper-local organization organizing in the neighborhood, Little Village. And they organized for 20 years to shut down a coal plant. And this is where the concept of just transition comes from, is folks in the labor movement saying that we need to have a just transition for workers in dirty industries, and we need to ensure that their communities are lifted up and made more safe as well, because oftentimes those workers go home and their communities are sited right next to the fossil fuel infrastructure that's giving everybody asthma. And so YDSA and other politically grounded organizations that we should be building coalitions with are more grounded in that political horizon, and we can say, well, the rich technocrats want to provide an expert solution and they want us to just keep working, but we should be building the democratic structures to be able to seize our future.
Everything Sean said is exactly right. Both of us have been working in climate organizing spaces for years, and until I would say the past 2 or 3 years, so much of the focus was on personal consumption, right? Just like you need to eat be completely vegan, you need to drive an electric car, take public transit or bike. All those are good things, definitely not knocking that, they're important. But at this point, we're just way beyond a time when we can rely on individual consumer change to drive the massive societal changes we need to reshape our entire economy. And also, those things we're never going to do alone. Even 2 decades ago, So in the past 2 or 3 years, I think based on the strength of all these climate justice groups that have, existed for decades, that have really picked up a lot of momentum in the past 5 or 6 years, that's really been driving a lot of the shift that you're probably seeing now as you're coming to climate politics as students. That wouldn't have happened without a lot of deep organizing over years and decades. And to the point where somebody like Greta Thunberg can come out and just be like, it's the entire economic system, and we need to shift away from endless growth. Like, those are the things that are not being said in human climate talks or whatever. So I think that sort of liberal approach to climate politics is very individualized. Like, that's something that YDSA is a clear break from. That's part of the leadership. And also just in terms of policy, like, we're really centering public ownership, which is something that you weren't hearing at all like 3 or 4 years ago. But there were, plenty of groups that were smaller, more decentralized, that were focusing on things like rural electric co-ops and other really important policy pieces, but they just didn't have nearly as many resources and interests as they have developed in the past few years. And I think without the strength of a bunch of YDSA chapters organizing around public utility ownership, we probably wouldn't see that in Bernie Sanders' campaign platform this year, which is a really big breakthrough. And YDSA can't take all the credit, but I think it definitely helped that in a bunch of the big city chapters, we had these amazing campaigns in Chicago and New York and Bay Area, San Francisco. And that has been a really meaningful contrast with, say, Elizabeth Warren, who until maybe 3 months ago was being talked about as like, oh, she and Bernie have equally ambitious climate programs, which isn't the case. And I think because of YDSA and other groups aligned with us, we were able to really make the case for Bernie as the climate candidate. And that's like every group that's organizing around the primaries now, that's true. So I think, what sets YDSA's approach apart from a lot of other climate groups that have been organizing for a long time is our entire policy framework. This is a systemic crisis, and also just the way that we organize, as John said, is very deliberative about building coalition and partnership in a deep and meaningful way, not transactional, with groups that have been on the front lines. So I think that's just something that reigns everywhere we organize.
Yeah, one thing that I have noticed about organizing as an eco-socialist is that it's so vital because our issues are intersectional. So in order to be like eco-socialists, we are explicitly anti-racist. And we are explicitly and it's necessary to have this approach because in the United States, racism is imprinted on the capitalist DNA that functions in our society. And if you don't take a Marxist approach to what we're doing and realize that like healthcare is going to take care of the kids on the south side of Chicago who are the most affected by the pollution that goes on in our city. And if you and it's important for us to realize that like all of our campaigns and everything that we're fighting for has come to this moment. And it's a huge turning point for us to be able to come together and to unite and organize around